above all, what do we want evidence for? What do we want to do with evidence? Well, as an economist, I would say we're looking for causality. What is copyright? Well, the economic sort of view of copyright is that it's an incentive. Well, is it an incentive? Are we just propping up industries, or are we truly stimulating creators? Causality is what economists attempt to look for by formulating theoretically based hypotheses and finding relevant data to test them. This could be surveys or it could be official figures. But the point is that facts do not speak for themselves. To become evidence, data must be related to behavior. And even then, we can't prove something. We can just provide evidence that does not refute that hypothesis.
Now, you'll see from the agenda that the first 3 sessions, the policymaker session, the stakeholder session, and the social sciences scientist session, each of these were to give their view on evidence for evidence-based policy. And this then feeds into the lawyers' session, and the lawyers give their response to evidence for evidence-based policy.
I think they were an excellent mix of perspectives and quite typical for different approaches to evidence. One, the economist looks at the nature of evidence, what are the features which make good evidence. The other perspective, looking at the process. Good evidence arrives through an appropriate process. So there are very different starting points for producing evidence.
The only sort of rule, I guess, we're going to impose on the panel is that the evidence for copyright obviously is somewhat controversial, but the focus here is not to debate that evidence, rather to discuss what constitutes valid evidence for copyright policy. From the stakeholders' perspective, what policy processes would support the gathering of valid evidence for copyright policy?
The question to the panel is, should there be an obligation on industry bodies and collecting societies to make data available, because they do have very, very, very good data?
I mean, in our case, incidentally, we have an open API, and all of the data that we collect is available for non-commercial use on our API, and people do what they want with it, and they do.
Just to supplement though, cost, because there's a cost of answering all the evidence, the policy questions, and there's a cost of doing research, and that's the importance of asking the right questions, so that we invest our, we spend money on the right research to get to the right answers.
I do think the IPO's position as enunciated is rather incoherent. What's on paper is really quite a positivistic and scientific conception of research. I mean, the only way I can interpret why it takes that form is that it's there to protect against lobbying and basically interest groups, because it really doesn't bear much relationship to how social scientists go about their work, at least not this one. I think also that it does privilege the quantitative over the qualitative, and I think we've heard some quite eloquent arguments about why cases and qualitative accounts may actually be taken rather seriously as evidence and give us important insights into the field that we're discussing.
I have been wondering some of the days, most copyright is now being made by our masters in Brussels. A lot of it has continental notions which are along the lines of it's nothing to do with economics at all, or indeed money, but all about an extension of the author's personality.
So what we hope to get out of this meeting is more understanding about the validity of different approaches to these problems, and possibly some conclusions about how the processes of providing information on copyright policy might be improved.